Rick is an ugly, disgusting, useless loser who suddenly decides to become a world-class giga-chad after spending his entire life as an underpaid and overworked receptionist. This happens after a hot elf with loaded plot cannons makes him realize he's letting capitalism kick his dumb ass when he should be using his steroid-amped muscle to become a god-tier adventurer. However, even after going through an intense training arc, this loser stays a measly E rank. The only catch is his plot armor is so overpowered that even S-tier wannabe Supermans can't touch him. That's because 2 years before his career switch, this loser trained under the craziest suicide squad in history who turned his useless muscles into steel. So after this Saitama-inspired training arc, Rick is finally back in the capital to take his E-rank test and officially step up his game. Once in the central guild, he immediately approaches the desk and starts talking to the girl working at the guild who has such humongous plots that she could probably survive skydiving without a parachute by just landing on her plots. She recognizes Rick instantly, as they used to clap each other. Work together at a guild back when Rick was a loser receptionist, and they start giving each other a recap of the last 2 years of their lives. Just then, a massive simpy loser approaches the desk and starts trying to rizz the girl up. But giga-chad Rick intervenes and simply smashes the dude on the stomach and he faints. No one really thinks a lot of it since he was basically a nobody the last time anyone saw him, and he is applying for the second worst rank of adventurer, and the girl just gives him his exam ticket. However, just as Rick says bye to the girl and leaves, she sees a massive handprint on the dude's armor that was made with Rick using 0.3% of his strength. As more people come up to the desk, revealing that this mega creep was actually a rank adventurer that was supposed to be super powerful. As Rick walks out of the guild, he is intercepted by his friend, a dark elf called Renette. And the middle-aged weirdo that he is, Rick can't stop staring at her world record massive plots, and he even tries bullshitting his way out of the situation when she notices it. A little later, Rick goes to get his measurements taken, and the people there almost get a heart attack when they see that he is 32 years old. After poor old Rick was subjected to ageism, he goes along with the other contestants to get his mana level tested on a weird crystal ball. Once he finally gets his turn with the crystal ball, Rick adamantly puts his hand on it, and he gets the absolute saddest possible mana level of F, and everyone starts calling him out as he seems mega weak on top of being too old. However, just as he leaves, the crystal ball shatters into pieces from the sheer aura of Rick's hand. The next test Rick has to pass is punching a slime bag as hard as he can to determine how strong he is. As he is waiting on his turn, he remembers his insane training with one of his seniors, the orc called Brufston, and how his crazy ass made him punch the strongest slime bag ever, the golden slime bag, more than 50,000 times a day, until he could absolutely annihilate it. The dudes that are in line before him start punching the bag before a super rich brat called Freed Diamut comes along and starts getting mega cocky even though he is at the ripe old age of 11, only managing to slightly move the slime bag in one direction with some fire magic. Once Rick finally gets his turn, the pesky examiner starts giving him a lesson on how he is super old and how he can't get his mana level to level up unless he trains it at a young age. Rick, however, doesn't give two shits and remembers all of his tough training, goes up to the slime bag and pummels it straight out of the room through the wall. The next stage is defense magic, and Rick straight up manages to block super high level magic despite having an unseemly low level of magic himself because of his insane mana control skills. Next for Rick is a super boring written exam which he passes easily because he is a massive nerd who has done nothing but work as a receptionist for the past 15 years. After the exam, as he is talking to Rionette about how he has been making great progress since leaving his nerdy wimpy days behind, the cocky kid, Freed, appears out of nowhere with his sister, Angelica, and they start roasting poor Rick out of his mind with all the ageism. Angelica starts flaming him and telling him that it's his fault that he made the spoiled little brat angry by being better than him, and she throws Rick her glove as an invite to a duel. Rick, being the uneducated idiot he is, picks up the glove, not wanting it to get dirty, and Rionette then tells him that he accidentally accepted the duel by picking the glove up. A little later, they all find themselves in a massive arena, with Angelica going full-on cockiness mode and stating that the loser will forever be a servant to the winner. Meanwhile, Rionette gives Rick's confused ass some lore and explains that Angelica is about as powerful as a B-rank adventurer, and this gets poor Rick absolutely shook, as he is just a puny F rank. Rionette then has to smack some sense back into him and remind him about his insane training that had been going on for the past 2 years, and that he is actually a full-fledged member of the strongest party in the world, the Orichalcum Fist. Rick remembers that he is actually not supposed to be a wimp anymore, and he gathers his newly formed adventurer balls and steps up to fight Angelica. She strikes right at him with a sword, but he dodges the attack with absolutely no problems. Freed, the little spoiled idiot starts yapping about how his sister is the fastest, but giga-chad Rick can basically see all of her attacks in slow motion. After literally almost getting bored to the point of unalivement and even contemplating that Angelica may actually be the queen of nepotism given her rich-ass family, she accidentally trips and starts uncontrollably tumbling towards poor Rick, who still keeps undermining his skills. Angelica still thinks that she has a chance to beat poor Rick up and tries to attack him with the most powerful version of her blink step quick attack. Then after wasting 2 of her possible 3 uses, she gets prepared for a 3rd one and starts running towards Rick. In the last second, as Rick was prepared to intercept her, her clumsy ass trips on yet another rock and ends up flying towards him again, with Rick having to punch the ground to stop this nonsense, making a huge Hulk smash moment and destroying half of the arena. Basically scared shitless, Angelica surrenders to Rick and starts asking him questions about how he is such a strong dude. However, quickly after that she gets her horrible bitchy entitled attitude back and, hoping that Rick will simply forget about the terms and conditions of the battle, and the fact that the loser was supposed to start serving the winner, just bolts out of there in the blink of an eye. As her and her entitled little brother leave, Rick and Rionette talk about how the rest of the Orichalcum Fist is going to be arriving to witness greatness, and the completion of Rick's journey from an absolute receptionist wimp into a fully fledged adventurer. The next day, the Guinness World Record holder for the least confident man in the universe, Rick, is waiting for his first stage exam results, with poor Rionette trying to big up his horrible confidence, but failing miserably. However, he passes with no problem, and Rionette congratulates him by not moving a single muscle in her face. As they step out of the classroom into the hallway, they meet the 3rd Diamond sibling, a pretentious bag of creepiness mixed with unbearable arrogance, called Raster, and he immediately tries to rizz up poor Rionette. Rick tries introducing himself to Raster, but given the fact that he isn't a young dark elf, but an old muscular dude, Raster really isn't interested. He seems to have watched a little too much of Sigma Grindset videos, since he has just met poor Rionette, and is already trying to get her to be his 2nd wife. Rick immediately intervenes and shows puny Raster what it means to be a real giga-chad by claiming that Rionette is his girlfriend. This really gets the level 1 creepster Raster up, and he starts telling poor Rick about how super cool and strong he is and how he is going to be his examiner. He even tries convincing Rionette one more time to go with him, but she smooches her massive plots against Rick and, to his surprise, confirms that she is his girlfriend. Raster finally loses his shit and starts threatening Rick that he will do everything in his power to be his examiner and make his exam an absolutely horrible experience. As he leaves, Rick's clumsy self starts apologizing to Rionette for calling her his girlfriend, and once again, to his surprise, she actually liked it. That night, the 2 spoiled brats go to Raster and start complaining about how Rick smacked their useless asses up and immediately sets his sights on revenge. The next morning, as Rick still has the confidence of a wet rock and is worrying about what he will do if Raster gets selected as his examiner, he encounters a different dude, Lorot, who says that he will be his actual examiner, and Rick finally breaths out a breath of massive relief. It turns out that this dude is even older than him, and that he is really eager to be as strong as possible, having managed to reach B rank by training like crazy for 20 years. As they part ways, the poor dude goes into a basement to speak to Raster, and very soon after that, the contestants receive a very suspicious announcement that the examiner has fallen ill, and that all of them will actually be examined by Raster instead. Rick almost chokes on his water, still not at all confident in his own abilities. The other contestants, all practically shitting bricks, reveal that the pesky Raster has a nickname, the F-Rank Crusher, as he loves nothing in the universe more than getting his own ego up by destroying a bunch of poor F-Ranks. A while later, Rionette realizes that Rick's ego is perhaps the flimsiest ego in the history of the universe, and she starts hyping him up by telling him that she 100% believes in him and that she has believed in him since the first day. Their conversation is interrupted by the shadiest person ever, who poses as a fortune teller, and gullible old Rick falls right into his trap, immediately being teleported upon sitting on the chair on which he was supposed to get his future told to him. Rionette isn't having any of this bullshit and starts slicing the air with her insane spells, grabbing the conman immediately, and it turns out to be none other than the leader of all brats, Freed, and she makes him give up Rick's location in an instant. Meanwhile, poor confused Rick got teleported straight to a nearby shore, where some Diamut goons are waiting to do their best to kick his unconfident butt. Luckily, just at that moment, all three of his other seniors from the Orichalcum party appear. Brufston the insanely powerful talking orc, Aliceret, a little lowly necromancer, and Mizet, a crazy inventor dude specializing in bringing future artifacts into his time, like a massive assault rifle. Poor Rick tries his best to get the goons to bolt out of there, because he knows that shit is about to get real. But the goons are seriously not taking him seriously whatsoever. On top of that, the dumbest one of them all straight up smashes his huge sword across Brufston's face, and it breaks into a billion pieces. However, the giga-chad that he is, instead of pulverizing him on the spot, Brufston straight up starts analyzing the goon's strength as well as what he is doing well in his training and where he is lacking. Not getting the memo at all, the dude tries punching him and Brufston catches the punch and turns his hand into a smudge, yet immediately heals it afterwards. Meanwhile, Mizet takes out his rifle and starts talking to Rick, while making the rest of the goons eat some lead. One of the goons commits the gravest mistake of all time and grabs Aliceret, threatening to unalive her if the others don't obey them, and she makes him eat his words really quickly. The main goon, realizing that he is facing the Orichalcum fist, straight up retires on the spot, saying that he can now go out and live his life out in peace, having seen such unbelievably powerful dudes. While this is happening, Rionette is still interrogating the life out of bratty little Freed, and he almost gets unalived out of pure fear when he sees that Rick is already back so soon. This leads to Rionette implanting him in a nearby wall, and just then, the first examiner, Lorot, appears and says that it was indeed Raster who had smacked him up and locked him in a dungeon, and he begs Rick to quit the exam, worrying what Raster might do to him. This incident finally causes Rick to grow a pair, and he goes towards the arena super pissed to deal with the pesky annoying entitled dude that is Raster. As Rick is approaching the arena to smack some sense into Raster, the world almost comes to an end as Alice, the receptionist from Rick's old job, and Rionette finally meet on the stands to see who has the bigger, bouncier plots. After meeting each other, Alice gets brought to meet the rest of the Orichalcum fist, but Rionette quickly drags her away as Mizet was already about to pounce on those bouncy plots. Before they start fighting, Rick starts asking about why such a douchebag like Raster even became an adventurer in the first place, and he starts spewing some crap about how it would bring prestige to a noble like him and that he is quite likely to quit at some point. This really brings Rick to the edge, and he now wants even more to destroy his entitled ass as he is an adventurer for all the wrong reasons. Rick remembers what Rionette told him before the fight, and that he should stay as calm as possible, not being even slightly intimidated by Raster's rushed attacks. As Rick is standing, still unfazed about the attacks Raster is throwing towards him, Brufston starts explaining to Alice how Rick had an unseemly low useless level of mana capacity since he started training way too late, and how he made him focus entirely on training his body to the maximum capacity. The idiot Raster keeps shooting all kinds of magic at Rick, while he is dodging with no problem whatsoever. Thinking that he might have gone a little overboard with the massive boulder he threw at Rick, he almost poops his pants seeing Rick straight up split it in two with no problem. Having finally had enough of Raster just spamming spells at him, Rick punches him away, concluding that, while he does have obscene amounts of mana, he has simply been a lazy bastard and hasn't polished his skills whatsoever. The next attack Raster throws at him, a super special fiery attack, Rick straight up absorbs into his hand, saying that he doesn't even need to use any spells of his own to block such a horribly unpolished spell. The only thing that Raster admits is the fact that Rick's power level is clearly over the E rank, but doesn't even give him nearly as much props as he deserves, making it seem like he has not won the battle because he is tired. As the fight continues, it is revealed that poor Rick actually got unalived many times during his 2 years of training, and that it was actually Bronson and his healing magic that kept bringing him back to life, and that is how he was able to reach a Super Saiyan level of strength in just 2 years. Raster, on the other hand, does not want to believe this at all and starts laughing at Rick like a maniac when he says that his goal is to smack up Kaiser Alcipe at once and for all, the strongest monster of them all. It turns out that the entire Orichalcum Fist has this exact same goal of beating the most powerful monster that even the toughest adventurer, Yamato the hero, couldn't beat. Raster decides that he has had enough of this crap and uses his most powerful spell to bind Rick down and goes full on Hashirama mode, summoning a massive mecha wood statue for himself to smash into Rick. But Rick punches straight to it with the simplest air cushion spell that he trained over 1 billion times, while using a time-slowing jutsu. After this, Raster flies straight into the stands all beaten up, and our Ike is as confident as ever that he will be able to accomplish his dreams. A while later, all of the Orichalcum Fist gang come to him and start bigging him up for using his training and destroying the entitled poser that is Raster. Meanwhile, Raster is trying to leave the place entirely and go home, but has, unfortunately for him, entered into the flaming zone as Rick starts giving him lessons exactly why he lost, and how he should simply train some more to finally get good. Raster finally gets off of his high horse and accepts that he got smacked up like a bitch, promising Rick that he will definitely win the next time they face each other. As night begins to fall, Rick and Rionette patiently wait in front of the speaker to see if Rick's crazy ass will finally be promoted to an E-rank warrior, despite the fact that both of them know what he is truly capable of. Before hearing the news of whether he passed or not, Rick remembers his childhood and how he was a super nerdy kid, reading the book about Yamato the hero all day long. However, after telling his parents that he wants to be an adventurer, they immediately hit him with the "you better find a real job" line, and crush his dreams a little bit. A while later, in school, it is discovered that Rick actually has an inherent skill sleeping inside him, and he gets told to just chillax and that it will activate one day on its own. However, after several years have passed, poor Rick hasn't gotten any closer to awakening his epic special skill. At one point, even some of his friends hit him with the cold truth that sometimes inherent skills never really tend to awaken, and that he should maybe just become an adventurer even without the skill. But they couldn't understand that he was simply built different and that he had different goals than anyone else. Instead of that, as his skill wasn't getting awakened, he takes up the job of a boring receptionist, to the delight of his boomer parents. After being an insanely good nerdy receptionist for 15 years, and teaching the unreasonably big-plotted Alice how to be a good little receptionist just like him, one day he encounters his good friend Zaid, who has finally become a B-rank adventurer. As he goes home that night, Rick starts thinking if he wasted his last 15 years of his life by doing an incredibly boring job instead of following his dreams like he had always wanted to. Just then, he hears a girl screaming, and despite working behind a desk, his natural morals and instincts haven't withered away, and he goes straight to find her. On the way there, he stumbles upon a massive mega troll, and Rionette just peacefully walking around, not knowing that Rionette can annihilate the troll with the power of her insane plots. I mean slices. Rick stands up in front of her like the true big bald receptionist he is. Rionette thanks him, but just ends up slicing the troll in half with her epic skills, and Rick and her start talking. Once Rick finds out that she is an S-rank, he literally loses his shit and tells her about his nerdy childhood dream to beat up the Kaiser Alcipian and his unawakened skill, asking if he could possibly still become an adventurer, despite being mega old in adventurer standards. Not wanting to gaslight him, Rionette straight up tells him that although he has got a pair of nuts on him, that there is realistically no chance of him becoming an adventurer now, and even though pretty hurt inside, Rick accepts the fact with a smile. He even casually asks Rionette out on a date, and, despite not expecting it at all, she actually agrees. The next evening, as he is walking around the town all happy that he's finally going on a real date with an actual girl, Rick hears monsters causing a massive ruckus yet again, and he is pretty pissed that his perfect date night is getting ruined, but figures that he has to try and help out. He approaches the noise and sees that Rionette is already wiping the floor with a bunch of trolls, and sees that there is no reason to worry. All of a sudden, however, Rionette practically faints out of pure fear after sensing an enormous amount of mana in their vicinity. Luckily, as she falls down into Rick's arms, Zaid and the other adventurers from the town come up and start fighting the rest of the beasts in Rionette's place. When Rick finally asks Rionette what happened, she tells him that the only thing that can get her like this is when she senses the mana of a dragon, because of a trauma she received when she was young. At first, Rick tries persuading her that there is no way that a dragon would appear in those regions, and just as he said that, an absolutely humongous dragon flew in from above them and landed right next to the group, immediately forming a barrier, making it impossible for anyone to escape. As everyone starts crapping their pants, the only dude with nuts large enough to stand up to the dragon is the one and only Rick, as he decides to get unalived as an adventurer instead of a measly receptionist. Seeing the pure strength of Rick's resolve, Zaid and his party join in and they start fighting the dragon with all they've got. but the dragon activates his fire breath and sends them flying all around the inside of the barrier. Rick, however, pretty badly beat up and injured, gets up and is ready for a round 2 with the beast. And just as he approaches him, the dragon seemingly smooshes him with his foot. Just then, his inherent skill finally awakens, as he uses his newfound Super Saiyan mode and lifts the dragon's foot off of himself, completely destroying the dragon and taking his head clean off. Everyone watches on in absolute amazement and awe as he just straight up faints from exhaustion after finally activating his skill. After a whole week, he wakes up in a bed with Rionette by his side, who tells him that his entire magic circuit is completely shattered and that he might as well be unalived, which means that he will have to rest a lot to be able to fully recover. After she tells him that she simped for him and waited by his side for the entire week, Rionette invites him to the Orichalcum Fist as they have the same goal of beating the Kaiser Alsepet. And Rick straight up starts crying, as she also tells him that she is sure that he will be able to become stronger and fight with them. As Rick finally comes to, and remembers that he is actually in the room awaiting to hear whether he became a ranky adventurer or not, he finally hears his number, 4242, and a fat wad of relief comes over him as he becomes fully grateful that he never ended up giving up on his dream of becoming an adventurer. The next day, as Laurent was getting better finally after getting his ass handed to him by Raster, he asks Rick to finally go on that drink they were talking about, and tells him about what really interests him, and that is knowing more about and potentially joining the Orichalcum Fist. Rick almost has a heart attack on the spot but agrees to bring him to the mansion and allow the members of the Fist to see what Laurent is all about. As Rick brings him into the mansion, they are immediately greeted by Rionette in her classic maid outfit, and Aliceret, whose bratty behavior reaches a new high as she throws a massive spell towards poor Rick and Laurent because Rick hasn't played with her for a long time, leaving Rick to barely block it and send the spell flying towards a wall, making an enormous hole. Aliceret only starts behaving once Rionette threatens to deduct money from her food budget to fix the humongous hole in the wall she has created, as she is a bottomless pit when it comes to food, consuming anything in sight. As Laurent tries to take in the insane size of the mansion and the backyard, Mizette gets him to test his new futuristic weapon, which looks eerily similar to what we know as a bazooka. After this, Laurent walks around the castle and stumbles upon Brufston, who is chilling and reading a book in his room that looks a lot like a library given the fact that there are around 1 million books surrounding him. After talking to him for a while, Brufston concludes that Laurent has the exact same fire in his eyes as Rick had when he came to the mansion, and he takes him out into the forest for a training session. After thinking that he is gone and barely being saved by Rionette, who just happened to be under the cliff crazy-ass Brufston pushed him off of, and she assumes that this was Brufston's doing, telling poor Laurent that it was Brufston who caused Rick to get unalived most often, after all. Later in the day, Rick finally manages to reach Laurent, and he is already almost unalived, and Rick tells him that there are several sentences that he should never believe if they come from the mouths of the members of the Fist. As night approaches, Rick and Laurent have some tea and Laurent starts giving Rick's confused ass some dating advice as to how he is supposed to interact with Rionette. A while later, as everyone is having supper, Laurent gives bamboozled Rick a sign that he should seize the moment and go help Rionette when she leaves to give everyone some more food. Once they leave, Brufston starts talking to Laurent about Rick's sick reckless soul skill, and he explains to Laurent that he can't activate it on his own, but that if he were able to use it, that his crazy ass could probably even surpass the members of the Fist. He goes on and asks Laurent whether he has heard of the magic stones that are known as the 6 Jewels, and tells him about their goal to smack up the Kaiser Alsepet, and that they need the jewels to open the door which would take them to him. Laurent tells them that while he doesn't know anything about it on the spot, he will do his best and try to find out as much information on the jewels as possible. After a couple of days, Brufston, Rick, and Aliceret try to take on a quest, but the receptionist tells them that they need another person, and the receptionist finds a random poor F-rank girl who is cleaning, Ray Lucas, and practically makes he join their party and go on this super dangerous quest with them. They immediately leave and start walking around through the forest looking for the monsters they are supposed to pulverize. And as Rick talks to Ray, she starts thinking to herself that she doesn't want to end up old and useless, like she thinks that Rick is, given that he is officially only an E-rank adventurer, after all. Meanwhile, back in the mansion, Mizette is fully giving into his weirdo side and has constructed a device whose whole entire purpose is to blow Rionette's skirt up when she isn't looking, so the king of creepiness, Mizette, can look upon what is underneath. However, this doesn't work at all, as Rionette clocks onto what is happening immediately, slicing his new machine in half like the true badass that she is. A while later, the gang in the forest finally reach the monster, and it turns out to be a massive wyvern, which Ray immediately almost soils her pants after seeing. Ruffston, however, doesn't give a crap and goes over to the wyvern and smacks him straight across the face. Ray starts panicking like crazy, and Rick has to take her away to calm her down a little bit, while Ruffston starts beating the living crap out of the wyverns in the lair as Elisarette burns them to a crisp. Out of nowhere, a special red wyvern that is basically a massive dragon attacks Ray and Rick. Ray immediately wants to bolt straight out of there, as Rick, the crazy dude that he is, goes straight towards the wyvern. This causes Ray to remember Yamato the hero, how he would never abandon his friends and finally grow a pair, and decides to join the fight. However, before she could even get a chance to join the fight, Rick turns into a dollar store Satan and pummels the wyvern with his crappy level 1 magic, annihilating its head with one punch. When she returns, Ray talks to the receptionist at the guild and he explains that the Orichalcum Fist is the strongest party in the world, and Ray starts getting super hyped up that she can too become an S rank and leaves her crappy cleaning job immediately and goes to train. After finally coming back to their mega mansion, Ruffston reveals to everyone that he managed to find one of the jewels they were looking for in the wyvern lair. Mizette takes the orb and casts a spell on it, which is supposed to reveal the location of the other orbs, and they find out that the next one is in Heractopia, a country known for its Colosseum and their insane combat arts. Not long after this, the gang have already basically teleported to Heractopia, and Ruffston has already found someone that he would have wanted to fight. The first king of Heractopia, King Alexander, who was the one that created the battle tournament Heractopia is famous for. However, they remember what their mission is and start walking around town asking people about the orbs, and everyone keeps getting scared and bolting out of the way the moment they see Ruffston and his insanely scary looking frame. After a little walking around, they stumble onto a massive creep named Gold who is fighting with some poor girl named Militia in a random backstreet. Ruffston very quickly gives him an offer he can't refuse by smashing him up with his fists, and this leads to Gold completely switching sides, with both him and Militia basically offering to do anything for Ruffston. Rick gets the orb out and shows it to them, asking if perhaps they have seen anything similar somewhere in Heractopia. Luckily for the Fist, it turns out that they have, and that the orb they are looking for is stuck on the champion belt of the famous Heractopia martial arts tournament, and is currently in possession of the part-time quintuple champion and full-time jack dude Kerwin Erwolf. Just as they are talking to Gold, Kerwin comes strolling around in a massive parade, and the Orichalcum Fist confirm that the orb is indeed on his belt. After finishing the parade, Kerwin goes into his go-to gym and talks to his trainer, when the crazy dude Ruffston storms into the gym and straight up demands that Kerwin gives him his belt immediately. He tries making up a story about how the jewel used to belong to an old party member, but neither Kerwin nor his trainer want to give up the belt, so they all just agree for Ruffston and Rick to join the tournament and try to win the belt fair and square. As the members of the Fist leave, Kerwin tells his trainer that he really didn't want to fight them there, and then given that he felt the pure aura they had in the room, and he is very excited to clash with them in the tournament. Meanwhile, Ruffston and Rick come up with the plan to join the different leagues of the tournament so they can both qualify, as even the qualifiers of this tournament are quite difficult to pass. Once he enters, poor Rick once again has to go through a mock match to see if he has got what it takes to participate in the tournament. As his opponent comes out into the arena to fight him, it turns out to be none other than the bratty sister of Freed, Angelica Diamond, who he had already turned into dust when they previously fought. She shit herself on the spot while dudes from the crowd discuss how incredibly flat she is. Angelica starts talking to Rick, asking him why he is even here and is worried about what she will do now that she has to fight him again. She decides to immediately try and give it her all, but the absolute madman jokester Rick keeps tripping her and not letting her even try and fight her, instead laser focused on annoying her till she quits. Angelica, however, decides to keep trying, yet Rick knocks her on her ass time and time again, until she straight up gets so annoyed that she quits the battle. After the battle, Angelica comes up to Rick and literally starts crying like a baby, begging him to tell her why he came there just to make her life a horrifying experience. They decide to all go together for a drink to explain and give each other lordums about their lives and why they are there. She says that she will do her best to win the tournament, however hard she must work for it. Once she realizes that Rick also wants to participate, she basically laughs at his crazy ass given the fact that he has to win 40 qualification matches if he wants to do that, which would most likely take a month. However, being a crazy dude with a severe lack of IQ, Rick tells her that he's scheduled 40 matches over the next few days. Angelica almost gets a heart attack while she hears this, begging him to stop being such an insane giga-chad. The next day, Rick goes to the qualifications, and the first dude he must fight is said to be a pretty sneaky bastard who carries hidden weapons on him, even though they aren't allowed. As they start fighting, the sneaky dude takes out a hidden impact stone, and he goes straight for Rick, trying to punch his massive pecs. However, instead of Rick, the dude's arm breaks cleanly in two, as Rick the Sigma starts giving him out advice for how he could become better, following in his daddy Brufston's steps. Meanwhile, Kerwin is training hard to get as ready as possible to fight Brufston and Rick, and to try to get a good fight after so long. After a while, Angelica has already managed to pass her qualifiers by wiping the floor with all of her mostly weak-ass opponents, and Rick is still going hard with his insane plan of beating 40 opponents in 4 days. However, Angelica finally tells him the information that his idiotness was lacking, the fact that the fights are held all across the country, with some events being over 100 kilometers away from each other. Rick, on the other hand, goes full on flash mode and straight up decides to run to every single venue and continue fighting his opponents, all while running around the country on his own 2 crazy feet. As Rick is probably halfway to the next venue, Rionette offers a very bamboozled yet very intrigued Angelica to get her to the venue as fast as possible, by literally grabbing her and Hulk jumping all around the town. A while later, Angelica has almost got unalived after reaching the first venue, and Rick has already promptly implanted the opponent into the floor. After a whole day, Rick has already smashed several opponents, and Angelica is as close to getting unalived as ever. 4 days later, and the madman Rick has well and truly won all of his matches, and Rionette and Angelica are discussing his crazy antics and work ethic over some tea. Angelica can barely take such a monster like Rick being in the tournament, and almost faints when Rionette tells her that Brufston is also in the tournament. Angelica asks about Rick and is not nearly as surprised that he went for a 600-kilometer run as she would have been just several days before. She even starts talking to Rionette about how everyone thinks that Rick and her are clapping, and Rionette straight up says that she is down for a piece of that Rick cake, making Angelica pretty jealous. Out of nowhere, a random dude comes up to them and asks them to volunteer for a job as they don't have enough part-timers. Meanwhile, Rick has finally returned from his little jog halfway around the country, and is immediately intercepted by a very dragony looking dude called Snape, who is the chairman of the committee that manages the West League which Rick is in. He congratulates Rick and tells him that he is the absolute Guinness World Record holder for the fastest dude to ever qualify for the tournament. They start talking and Rick asks him why he retired from fighting, as he felt it from his hand that he was battle trained once he shook hands with him. Then Snape tells him that he won a tournament back when he was a young little slimy gecko, but that he retired very soon after that. As he is leaving, he gives Rick the creepiest message of all time, telling him to tell Angelica to be careful not to play too much and to keep her body safe. When he reaches the main inn, Rick talks to Militia from earlier, and she tells him that there are a crap ton of rumors about Snape being connected to the underground and that he should be careful around him, even telling him that he is actually the sponsor of the tournament. Meanwhile, Angelica and Rionette have taken up the job the dude was offering them and are now wearing bunny suits that are barely able to cover their plots at all, trying to promote the betting business. Out of nowhere, a super drunk dude comes up and starts fondling Angelica like the most disgusting person he is, telling Angelica that she is super flat. And he gets exactly what he came for, when Angelica pummels his face and turning him into a massive purple plum. Just then, Rick comes up, and absolutely cannot believe how insanely good Rionette looks in her bunny costume, and they start flirting like crazy, with Angelica losing it at the fact that he didn't react like this when he saw her in the suit. At the same time as this, Kerwin and his trainer are reading the newspaper and are talking about Rick and his crazy ways, with Kerwin thinking that it's going to be a super fun year with all of these crazy new contestants in the tournament. The next day, Angelica is still pissed at the fact that Rick went crazy for Rionette, and not her. And that angriness is replaced with a very worried look once Rick tells her that he talked to the slimy gecko, Snape. Later that day, the league which will determine who goes through to the tournament starts, and the announcer with possibly the biggest plots yet announces that Angelica will be fighting another female fighter, who Angelica annihilates in no time. Meanwhile, Rick finishes his matches in around 3 seconds each by wiping the floor with all of his opponents. If she wants to go through, Angelica is aware of the fact that she has to do her best to not lose even once. In her next match, she fights a pretty bulky dude with a little mohawk, and it is not going quite like she thought it would. None of her magic works nearly as well, as the dude is surprisingly super fast considering how much he probably weighs, and he manages to dodge her punch with no problem, knocking her out with his massive fat fist. After that, Angelica starts the healing process, and Rick tries to talk to her asking why she didn't want to change her dumb tactic even though she was very aware of the fact that she would lose. However, she really doesn't want to talk to him at all but ends up talking anyway, spilling the beans about Snape and how he is actually her fiancé. This deal was only allowed to happen because her poor parents got unalived, and her money-hungry Gramps ended up making a deal with Snape and his trading company in exchange for Angelica's hand in marriage. Rick and his thick brain still can't get past the fact that Snape is her fiancé, but Angelica says that she is trying to investigate and find some dirt on Snape which would allow her to cancel the engagement. As they are walking around town, they come across a pretty heated situation where a massive red gecko dude, the brother of Snape, Jeeth, is being a massive dick towards a woman in the bar, and the mohawk dude Angelica fought tries intervening, but ends up getting smashed into the floor by the disgusting gecko dude. After doing this, he uses his claw and takes the clothes off of the poor woman, even starting to lick her like the true horrible creep that he is. Angelica intervenes but Jeeth goes straight to punch her, leaving Rick to have to block the punch and tell his creepy ass to calm down. Luckily, Snape comes out of nowhere and tells him to save it for the tournament, after which Jeeth bolts out of there, still pissed out of his mind. Snape goes on to explain to Rick that this is his younger brother and that he gets super irritated super easily, but that there unfortunately isn't anyone stronger than him who would be able to stop him. After this brawl, Angelica tells Rick that she thinks the sneaky plan behind the whole sponsorship situation is the fact that as a sponsor, Snape gets to put his own fighter in the tournament who he would just bet on and earn money that way. A very badass Angelica tells Rick that her plan is to smack his fighter, Jeeth, up and break off the engagement that way. And good guy Rick even offers to train her in order to help her get strong enough to beat Jeeth. The very next day, Angelica and Rick are already in the middle of a random desert, with Angelica more than hyped to finally begin her training arc. Rick, however, takes some notes from his fighting daddy Brufston and puts massive weights on her arms and legs, and makes her run 30 kilometers, for a start, while chained directly to his crazy ass that knows no limits. After only a few minutes, Angelica is already crying and Rick explains that this part of training is to get her used to crazy fast speeds first, so she can develop some sort of basics for the next stage of training. After 6 hours of this horrid training, Angelica is already seeing her parents waving to her from the afterworld, but is somehow still alive, which actually impresses Rick quite a lot, since he remembers that he had already got unalive 3 times after his first training day. Angelica thinks that this was all an elaborate plot from Rick to unalive her, and is happy that she managed to survive the first day. But only then does Rick let her know that they will actually continue their training after an afternoon break. And Angelica almost loses her shit. After 5 days of training with Rick the Madman, Angelica is chilling in an inn, trying to think of ways to run away from him. And Rick finds her, providing her with the not at all traumatizing information that he also tried to run away countless times, and got unalived over 10,000 times. Trying to get her horribly crushed morale up, Rick gives her a little pep talk he learned from his daddy Brufston, and tells her that she should always put her suffering on a scale with the regret she would have if she were to quit and see which one is easier. On top of that, he tells her that she is free to leave this insane training arc at any time, much like Brufston told his useless ass back when he got unalived a billion times. This conversation awakens something completely new and crazy in Angelica, and she gets more motivated than ever as they leave the inn, going into the desert to do some more training. Rick figures out that given Angelica's noble background, he could try and get Rionette to teach her the same insane slicing skill she has, as Angelica is already used to using a sword. A few days later, the day has finally come for Angelica to test her newly acquired skills, and she looks like a bloodthirsty hound that is about to consume her opponent whole. and she ends up beating his ass in 3 seconds, barely even being able to be contained after the match. A while after, in an inn, once she has come to, she starts getting some post-fight clarity and starts thinking about what she did to the dude in her blood-hungry state. Just at that moment, the rest of the gang in its entirety shows up, with Gold the bald dude ushering Brufston in like he was some sort of red carpet celebrity. He says that everything is going pretty chill in his league, and that they will definitely end up getting the orb. Brufston also sees that Rick has been using some of his old tricks and doing his best to try and train Angelica so she can smash up Jeeth once and for all. Everyone starts bigging her up and Angelica's confidence is skyrocketing like never before. After a few days, the real tournament finally begins, and everyone gets their opponents and are absolutely ready for a shit to get real. After the draw ends, Angelica starts working her conspiracy-heavy little mind and tells Rick that she has figured out that the draw was set in such a way which would make it so that Jeeth will only fight Brufston or Kerwin in the final, at which point Snape would just bet all of his dirty money on the other dude, while Jeeth loses on purpose and win easy peasy. However, Angelica has set her mind and decided that she is going to absolutely smash Jeeth in the second round to stop this evil plan from ever coming to fruition. As they are all preparing for their matches, Kerwin wishes Brufston and Rick good luck like the true giga-chad that he is, and his trainer remarks how crazy it is that he finally has the look of a challenger in his eyes, the look he lost a long time ago, when he became the strongest and started wiping the arena floor with any opponent he would come across. The first match finally begins, and it's Jeeth against a random guy, and Jeeth pretty much obliterates him without doing anything whatsoever. Rick notices that he is really strong, but that he didn't give two craps about dodging any attack and really fought with the movement of a real amateur. Angelica, Rick, Brufston, and Kerwin also destroy their opponents with ease, although Kerwin purposefully takes a punch, which Rick and his sneaky little eyes notice immediately, after Brufston explains to him that he is actually a sick fighter who has a special smelly skill that comes from him being half-wolf. The next day, Angelica finally gets what she wanted and is about to clash in the arena with the disgusting gecko-looking dude that is Jeeth. Meanwhile, everybody is watching from the stands, eager to see what the absolutely nuts training regime they put her on ended up doing to her power level. Out of nowhere, Snape comes along and asks Rick to sit next to him ready to watch the match. Before going into the arena, Angelica and Jeeth have a pretty intense roasting session where Jeeth reveals to her that he won't hit her in the stomach so that she could still bear children for Snape, and also tells her that he is actually jacked by default, as he hasn't trained for a single second in his entire dragony life. Angelica gets super pissed and is ready to smash his ugly red face in as they walk into the arena. As the match begins, Angelica tries to test out a theory and uses her normal semi-useless magic, and it proves to be well and truly useless against a horrible opponent such as Jeeth. Instead, to the astoundment of Snape, she removes her strengthening magic, gathers her mana, uses her epic quick step, and finally unleashes what Rionette has been preparing her for, managing to get a slice on Jeeth's ugly 14-pack. Snape is absolutely flabbergasted, thinking that nothing could pierce Jeeth's rock-hard skin, and Rick tells him that he should never underestimate Angelica. Rionette gives a very quick infodump as to how they trained her to use this jutsu in the first place, with Mizette jumping in to further explain that this technique would usually take a massive toll on the body, but given that Angelica managed to survive the terribly intense training arc managed by none other than the madman Rick, she will be just fine while using it. Angelica continues slicing at Jeeth and he grows more and more pissed off by the second, trying to smash her face in but only getting an enormous dodge by Angelica. However, in a few minutes, he manages to sneak up on her and kicks her right into the wall like it was soccer. Angelica continues trying to fight him, but Jeeth has now released his full potential, and is not letting her get anywhere near his ugly ass, continuously kicking her around like a ragdoll. At the same time, Snape tells Rick that it was actually Jeeth and his ugly red face that beat him all those years ago, causing him to retire, and that he has practically unraveled fighting potential. He even goes as far as to call out Angelica and her conspiracy theory ways, saying that Jeeth is strong enough that he doesn't even need match fixing to win the tournament, and that Snape planned to get money from it by betting on Jeeth immediately, since no one would expect a sponsor slot fighter to win the whole thing. Meanwhile, in the arena, Jeeth is roasting the crap out of poor Angelica, telling her that she is trashy, just like her parents, while still literally kicking her around like a football. Poor Angelica barely manages to get up, saying that she will not lose, as Jeeth grabs her by the hair, and starts taunting her like the true asshole he is. Angelica, with the last ounce of her strength, does her best to punch Jeeth in his ugly face, which makes him go into a crazy rage, running towards poor Angelica to unalive her with his claws. However, just before reaching her, Rick, so pissed off that he could basically rip him straight in two, throws his shoe at him, making him miss her, and the battle itself ends. After the match, Rick bumps into Jeeth and his awful antics in the corridor, and Jeeth is already ready to throw hands with him, while Rick, being the massive giga-chad, stays calm, waiting for their official match to clap his cheeks. While waiting for the other matches to finish, a very worried Rick goes and visits Angelica in hospital, and the doctors tell him that she is going to be alright. Once the finalists are revealed to be Kerwin, Rick, Brufston, and Jeeth, the day comes to an end, as Rick trains some more, alone, in the middle of the desert. The morning of the fight, Rick bumps into Angelica and she looks fairly lost and sad. As Rick says goodbye, poor Angelica starts crying, thinking that she is a talentless disappointment, and that maybe she should actually accept Snape's proposal and let go of her dreams, sliding into the role of a noble woman that was thrust upon her. Instead, Rick apologizes to her, saying that it is actually his fault because he never anticipated how powerful Jeeth could truly be, telling her to carefully watch their match, because Jeeth and him have been drawn against each other, as he will show her the true power of training. As the match between them begins, Jeeth starts off with a really bad idea, and starts trash-talking Angelica in front of Rick, who is growing angrier by the second. As soon as he approaches him, Rick starts punching his useless ass around, using Kai attacks, ones which hit the outside of the body, but actually damage the inside. Jeeth, however, gets angrier and activates some dragonfolk strengthening magic, running straight at Rick, even punching him around a few times. Brufston watches over the match with Snape, and Snape lets him in on a dirty little secret, telling him that Jeeth actually never trained his mana and just had an absurd amount since birth. Rick continues trying to fight him as he was doing previously, and is getting slightly pummeled by Jeeth and his ugly scaly face. Brufston finally explains that it doesn't matter to Rick at all how anyone else other than Angelica sees this match, as he wants to prove to her how strong she truly is by limiting his physical abilities to her own. Rick well and truly does not give two craps about winning, but about proving to Angelica how incredibly talented and full of potential she really is. Rick continues attacking Jeeth with his Kai attacks, and Jeeth is getting super tired, as his lazy ass had never before been trained to exhaustion. Snape starts getting super worried, thinking that Rick must be much more talented than Jeeth, and the gang explained to him and Angelica that he is about as talented as a wet cloth, but it's actually the pure strength of hard work that got him as strong as he is. Meanwhile, Rick just slowly approaches Jeeth while blocking all of his attacks, and tells him that he is useless while exhausted since he had never trained to move under exhaustion before, which is why all of his techniques are failing him. Rick acknowledges the fact that Jeeth well and truly is a prodigy given how strong he managed to get without ever training for a minute, but tells him the truth straight to his scaly ears, that he is only a level 1 prodigy, given the fact that he never trained his natural physique and senses whatsoever. Rick finishes his roasting session by telling him that he has seen level 1000 prodigies, and that the only reason he thinks he is so strong is because he has simply never encountered a giga-chad stronger than him, even going as far as to call him Mr. Lizard in a small pond. This makes Jeeth incredibly pissed off, and he activates a peak dragonfolk strengthening jutsu, practically becoming a dragon, and running straight at Rick, pummeling him into the wall like he was nothing. Rick tries to attack him, but realizes that he has gotten a massive power-up and that current Angelica simply can't beat him. But not because she is a fragile little girl, but because she simply needs to train with everything she has. Rick then slowly starts using more and more power, emulating how much progress Angelica would make after more and more time spent under the insane training regime of the Orichalcum Fist. This power-up allows Rick to smash Jeeth up easy peasy, asking him what he will do now, given that he has been clowning on people for trying to get through the battle with pure willpower alone. This causes him to go into one final rampage, and Rick even uses the Thread Slicer jutsu on him, to showcase the true power Angelica would have after a hard year of training with him, and slices him straight into the land of unconsciousness. As Jeeth's ugly body gets carried away, Angelica starts thanking Rick and tells her that she will do her hardest to show him the progress in a year's time, saying that she will even do her best to surpass the Guinness World Record holder for the dude with the hardest training regimen of all time, Rick. Meanwhile, Snape seems pretty chill about the whole situation given the fact that he has probably lost a crap ton of money. And he says that he is pretty surprised, admitting that even he kinda wanted Jeeth to be defeated at some point, as he was the one who stopped his career after all. The marriage between him and Angelica gets cancelled, and he tells her that he really was looking forward to marrying such a wonderful girl like her, and straight up leaves, fully surprising Angelica by actually acting like a normal dude. Meanwhile, after everything has settled down, the time has come for the second semi-finals match between Kerwin and Brufston. And after only a few seconds and a little hyping up from Kerwin's trainer, Kerwin already notices that Brufston is the strongest opponent he has ever faced in his life. However, out of nowhere, the absolute pest that is Jeeth breaks straight through the wall of the arena and starts to cause carnage all over the stands, still extremely pissed off by the fact that he lost. Kerwin, however, is having none of that, and straight up gives him the Saitama treatment by defeating him with one punch. Just as Kerwin and Brufston are about to continue their fight, it gets cancelled and postponed for the following day due to the fact that Jeeth just caused a crap ton of carnage. As the day starts coming to an end, the whole Orichalcum Fist is chilling in an inn talking about how the mission is pretty much settled, as all they need to get their orb is for either Brufston or Rick to win. Meanwhile, Rick has gone to take one of his classic little 700-kilometer jogs, and on the way there, he encounters Kerwin sparring with some boulders, and very soon, he figures out that Rick is actually a much better sparring partner than a boulder and starts fighting him to try and figure out how strong he really is. Rick, on the other hand, has decided to use this perfect opportunity and prove a theory he has been concocting up in his crazy head, trying to punch Kerwin in the head, with Kerwin dodging with no problem. As he has realized that his theory is true, he asks Kerwin how he was able to dodge that punch if he got hit by a super crappy attack in the early rounds of the tournament. Finally thinking that someone is onto him, Kerwin gets a little worried for a second, but Rick immediately goes from genius level IQ to the IQ of a hot pocket, and asks whether it is because he had a stuffy nose and couldn't use his wolfy scent skills. Instead, Kerwin quickly speedruns his life story and basically explains that he got so strong that he got no satisfaction at all from fights like he used to, given the fact that he was raised on the streets, and turned to entertaining audiences instead. As he one night heard his trainer talk to a dude telling him that the tournament was getting too boring as Kerwin was just pummeling everyone left, right, and center, which is why his sneaky ass lost an entire tournament on purpose. Rick starts saying that strong people sure have it tough, once again undermining his own strength by a lot like the true low-confident dude he is. Kerwin tries to tell him that he is actually strong as well, but Rick just tells him that he will finally not have any leeway tomorrow when he fights Brufston, and just straight up bolts out of there. The very next day, the fight finally begins, with a massive barrier now having been installed since the dudes organizing the tournament realized that Jeeth was an unpredictable asshole, and that there might be more like him. On top of the fight already being of insane quality, Kerwin and Brufston stop fighting for a while to get a few words in, and they each give each other info on what Rick said to them about each other. Even though he has been yearning for a good fight for so long, Kerwin decides to pull his punches in this fight too, not wanting the audience to figure out that his sneaky ass has been deceiving them all along. Brufston regards this as true professionalism, telling him that he is pretty sad about not fighting him properly, and even decides to prove that he is the biggest giga-chad ever by opting to not move out of one place, and only fight with 2 fingers. Kerwin attacks him and Brufston literally catches his hand in between his 2 fingers like he was grabbing a sushi with chopsticks and flings him half the arena away. Out of nowhere, his trainer starts shouting at him, telling him that he is a massive idiot, and that he knows about him pulling punches, telling him to remember his dream of being the strongest, and that he himself wants him to be the strongest, and gives Kerwin just what he needed with a little daddy to son pep talk. Kerwin takes off his shirt and finally strikes at Brufston with all of his might, and Brufston decides to use his full palm, telling Kerwin that he is just adjusting the amount of fingers proportionate to the amount of strength Kerwin has started using. Kerwin is as happy as he could possibly be and even starts using a bunch of magic like a dog off a leash, even surprising his trainer, and the audience finally starts to catch on to the fact that he has been deceiving them all along. However, Kerwin doesn't give 2 craps about that and uses his magic to the full extent on Brufston, encasing his massive orc frame into some sort of insanely OP8 nature magic which bamboozles pretty much everyone in the crowd, as Kerwin spawns a massive meteor out of nowhere that is going straight for the arena. Meanwhile, Rick is losing his shit over the fact that Kerwin is much stronger than they would have ever thought, as he fears that might mean Brufston's impossibly strong ass would stop holding back. After pummeling the meteor to bits with brute strength, Brufston shows Kerwin a quarter thumbs up, a sign of a full power brawl between orcs, and goes at Kerwin, making him soil his pants a little bit in fear, after having practically forgotten what fear feels like. Brufston almost teleports to him, punching his poor ass straight in the gut, with Kerwin barely being able to block the punch in the last second, but still being beaten to a pulp. Convinced that he could do more, he gets up and continues fighting, using his stamina to the fullest. But what he doesn't know is that Brufston is practically an immovable object, as he uses all of his stamina trying to punch him, with Brufston not budging an inch. Everyone starts cheering their asses off for Kerwin as he uses the power of his own spirit, pouring everything he owns into one incredibly destructive final attack, which Brufston blocking it with his chest with no problem, congratulating Kerwin on giving his all, as Kerwin's crazy ass saying that he has had the most fun in his life. Brufston knocks him out cold out of pure respect, as his trainer finally realizes that the road to being the best fighter is still ahead of him. After he has finished beating the crap out of Kerwin, Brufston goes back onto the tunnel, where he is greeted by Rick, who congratulates him on the win and on practically obtaining the orb, saying that he basically just has to resign the match and everything is settled. However, what he didn't expect is Brufston being incredibly hyped for the match, looking forward to battling without his #1 student Rick, on the other hand, immediately starts balding and crying on the spot, worrying that he will get his ass handed to him by Brufston. At the same time, Kerwin, chilling in his bed and healing up slowly, is reading the newspaper with his trainer, and all of the articles are calling him out about his shady audience deceiving, but he doesn't really seem to care a lot, although he can't really understand why his trainer hasn't left him given the fact that he has lost the match after being a little deceiving dude. The trainer, on the other hand, finally tells Kerwin that he is actually like a son to him, with the giga-chad Brufston rudely interrupting the moment to go and offer his healing skills to Kerwin. Kerwin, on the other hand, doesn't want anything to do with any artificial healing, and given that he has been the strongest dude around for so long, kind of wants to endure the pain and feel it fully. On top of that, Kerwin tells him that he is mega excited for the final match, and tells him that Rick was right when he had told him to go all out against Brufston. Meanwhile, Rick is being a little bitch and has locked himself in his room, not letting anyone go inside, given the fact that he is actually petrified of fighting Brufston. Not even Snape, who comes along and sings a quick solo, begging him to get out and fight, only to immediately leave, can do anything about it. Angelica tries knocking some sense into him by telling him that he will be revived nevertheless even if he were to get unalived. But Rick really hates getting unalived and is insanely scared of fighting Brufston, no matter how much Angelica tries to hype him up by telling him that he has already survived 2 years of this horrifying training routine. After all else fails, she straight up tells him that she has misjudged him and that she doesn't want to train under him anymore, bolting out of there in an instant. As she leaves, Mizette pulls some new info out of his butt and tells Rick that Brufston already had the training plan ready when he came to the mansion all that time ago, because he had already been on the search for someone he could train to fight with him, given the fact that he hadn't had anyone to brawl with since he was a little kid, since he was just way too strong. On top of that, he is an orc, and orcs are very well known from settling all of their debates in a very ooga booga way, and Mizette tells him that he wouldn't hold it against him if he were to back out of the fight, but that Brufston is really looking forward to it, and even Elisarette backs him up. Later, while Rick is going through a few flashbacks, remembering how he met Brufston for the first time, the whole gang is having lunch and are discussing the fact that Rick does indeed have an inherent skill, and isn't all that useless. Mizette explains that he can't really use it properly, which led to Brufston banning him from using it. Meanwhile, as night approaches, Rick enters his low confidence era again and starts asking Rionette if he is lame through the door, and she simply tells him that she would prefer the Rick that would grow up hair, and go and fight Brufston instead of sitting behind a locked door like a wimp. Just as the people in the crowd are wondering what will happen, both Rionette and Angelica are hyping Rick up, as he is about to go into the arena. And just as Angelica starts believing that he has finally got his shit together, he turns around and starts shaking like a small tree on the wind. However, the announcer with the massive plot says that the bonus prize will be a day in a hot spring for 2, and just then, sneaky Rionette goes and whispers something into Rick's ear, which causes him to enter serious mode, and actually go out into the arena looking like a man instead of a wimp. Completely bamboozled as to what happened, Angelica looks over and comments on how refreshed Rick looks. No one in the crowd can really predict how the match of these two crazy dudes will go, and Rick immediately starts clashing head to head with Brufston, even making his arm bleed in just a few seconds. Luckily, the barrier is still there because the people would be absolute specks of dust given the fact that a bunch of meteor-sized rocks have already started to get launched all around the arena. The gang conclude that neither of them can actually use magic, and this will basically be a pure enhanced physical strength fight. After a few clashes, the madman that is Rick even manages to get a slice across Brufston's stomach, and everything starts making more sense when Rionette reveals to Angelica that she asked him to take her to the hot spring if he wins, and Angelica gets a little flustered and ever so slightly jealous. After only several minutes of fighting, Rick is already pretty beat up and tired. And just then, Brufston decides to be a nice dude and respect Rick by going on the offense for once. After just a singular punch, the whole entire arena starts shaking, and Kerwin concludes that just that one punch is as powerful as a 5th tier magic. After a few barrages of punches from the massive hunk of power by the name of Brufston, Rick manages to block one of his direct punches with a crappy 1st tier magic, Air Cushion. However, he manages to activate it in an instant without saying anything, which is something not even the giga-chad Brufston himself can do. And Rick proves he has got epic strength of his own after all, revealing that it was actually Mizette and Elisaret's crazy training that got him to unlock this skill after all. Rick continues attacking Brufston, and even attempts a full frontal attack with a very reckless high jump, but he actually manages to go crazy mode and use Air Cushion with his feet, practically air surfing, as Brufston tries to hit him unsuccessfully. At the end of this combo, Rick even manages to launch an air bomb at him, land perfectly, and he starts contemplating about how he could get close and hit his big gray ass with something from close range. Brufston legit pauses for a second and tells Rick that he has well and truly gotten a lot stronger, and Rick immediately believes him, knowing that he would never ever lie. Rick goes on and tells him that Mizette told him about his dreams of fighting someone as an equal instead of crushing everyone like they were breadcrumbs, and Brufston tells him that it isn't really his dream, more like a situation he would like to find himself in. Rick then gathers all of his balls and says that he well and truly wants to help Brufston fulfill his dream, as he has felt the fire of his dream kindling inside him while he was training him, and that he wants to fight him with the utmost respect. Brufston, realizing that he is truly blessed, admits that Rick is finally a full-fledged member of the Orichalcum Fist, and decides to give him a lore dump on how the fist was made there and then on the spot, despite the fact that the people are still watching, eager to see a battle. He tells Rick that he was really different from all of his dumb orc buddies in the pack, as he was not only stronger, but actually ended up finding some books and reading them, even trying to teach the rest of his pack about knowledge, but only managing to get all of them to practically worship him, distancing himself from everyone as no one had the guts to come up to him. After they all got unalive by a massive storm, Brufston realized how lonely he truly was when he found himself not caring too much about that. One day, however, as he was chilling by a fire, he got ambushed by a dude called Reinhard, who says that he was one of the legendary 5 epic dudes who fought with Yamato the hero, and they decide to join forces to defeat the Kaiser Alcipiat monster that Yamato tried defeating all those years ago. This lead to them forming the Orichalcum Fist, and after a while a bunch of other dudes of equal strength to theirs in the form of Mizette, Elisaret, and Rionette join, and that's when he came up with the training plan to fulfill his lifelong dream of brawling with someone like a classic orc-on-orc situation. Rick realizes that he can just continue fighting like a wimp, tactically, but ends up proving that he is indeed a massive giga-chad by showing the brawl sign, the quarter thumbs up, proving that he wants to go all the way and fight Brufston like a boss, apologizing to poor Rionette for having to take a rain check on the hot springs trip, since he figures out that he will be beaten to a pulp after the battle. Rionette realizes that this is exactly why she loves him, and they both start clapping each other's asses with all of their might. Meanwhile, as the barrier starts weakening from the massive amounts of epicness going on in the arena, Mizette straight up teleports all of the people out of the arena, leaving just all of them, Snape and Kerwin. The fight gets so unhinged that Rick even manages to break Brufston's orb necklace, and Snape notices that Rick hits much faster, while Brufston hits like an absolute truck. As Rick gets up after almost being knocked out, they go at each other and start punching it out like two absolutely crazy dudes. Rick ends up being the one who gets sent flying almost across the entire arena, and just as he was about to quit from absolute exhaustion, he realizes that he can still move his fingers and arm and does his best to pay his debt to Brufston by getting his ass up and continuing the fight. Rick gets all his strength, and at just that moment, his skill, Reckless Soul, activates, and he gets up basically like a Super Saiyan, ready to continue the brawl. As Mizette and Elisarette start laughing because their sneaky butts were the one who trained Rick to activate it behind Brufston's back, by making it so that it activates every time he gets the resolve to push his own limit against a far stronger enemy, and grow into a giga-chad. The only thing needed to activate it is the pure power of will, which Rick has got plenty of, and he shoots into Brufston like a bolt of sparkling muscles, punching him like he was a massive punching bag. They continue fighting, and Rick has finally got a level of strength equal to Brufston, who in turn realizes that his dumbass was chasing an equal brawl this whole time, despite the fact that he had friends next to him all the way. Angelica turns her brain on and figures out that they are both past their limits and that the next blow will determine the winner, with both of them clashing in the middle of the arena with all of their giga-chadness and epicness, knocking each other out at the same time. As his final words before getting knocked out, the legend Rick tells Brufston that he is such an insanely strong dude that he still can't beat him, even after going as far as he did, and Brufston ends up thanking him for finally helping him realize his dream, proclaiming Rick the true winner. After a few days, Rick has already managed to wake up, which is a massive improvement from the previous time where it took him a week to wake up, proving that he is getting less and less useless by the day. After waking up, he sees that the whole gang is there, and Brufston even gives him the belt, saying that he is the true winner, but Rick doesn't want to hear anything about it, saying that it is actually Brufston who deserves it, given the fact that he could have probably healed up at least 30 more times during the battle. Brufston finally gets super real and thanks everyone for putting their time into accomplishing his goal of getting an equal board, and only then does clueless Rick realize that he has secretly been trained. After a while, Brufston straight up takes the orb out of the belt like it was his all along, and they replace it with a new one with no problem. After this, Rick starts asking around about how old Reinhard is, and Brufston says that he has an inherent skill which makes him able to live to be super old, given the fact that the dude wrote the book on Yamato and Insane 200 years ago. A while later, given that Brufston and Rick are two pretty random dudes who have deleted their fighter entries, Snape asks Kerwin to hold on to the belt for him, and the trainer is pretty ecstatic. The next morning, the whole Orichalcum Fist is saying goodbye to the two absolute weirdest people on the planet, Gold and Militia, as they are basically fighting over who Brufston likes more, and Rionette brings a whole bunch of food along with them onto the journey to find Reinhard, who has apparently been on the run for the dumbest reason ever, a due book he hadn't returned. After a while, they part ways with Angelica for a while, who has to go home first, but is going to be back very soon as she has asked Brufston to train her, and Rick is practically pooping his pants on her behalf, as she tells him that she will one day surpass him. After they say their goodbyes, Rick decides to run home, a classic little run of 28 kilometers for his crazy ass, and they even have to buff their horse with magic so he can follow suit. Just as they are about to set off, Rionette asks Rick about the hot spring trip, and even though Rick can't really accept the fact that he's won the fight with Brufston, he can't stop thinking about how beautiful it will be to go on a trip with his boo Rionette. And Mizette concludes that the best thing they could do, since the fight ended in a draw, is just for Brufston and Rick to race home, with Rick's punishment for losing being an insane 100-fold of training. All of them start running like a bunch of Usain Bolts, and Rick tells Rionette that he will definitely end up taking her to a hot spring as he really doesn't want to do 100-fold of training. This brings us to the end of Rick's crazy journey from a loser receptionist to an S-rank adventurer. Thanks for sticking around until the end, you absolute legend. Like, subscribe, and click on the screen to watch some of our other exciting videos. Until next time, stay awesome, stay AniGeek.